Coach JC here. Today we're going to discuss lower back pains. This is a phenomenon that sort of swept the Western world over the last 20 years. We never really heard about people complaining of lower back problems prior to the turn of the century. Of course, you would receive those pamphlets at the workplace, which advised you on how you should lift something to prevent you from getting a slip disc. But no one really complained about the pain in the muscles, which is the erector spinae, that group of muscles just above your glutes there that people will feel pain. So just to distinguish the difference between a slip disc or prolapse disc is more to do with the vertebrae moving out of its position, moving out of its alignment. It's not really the muscles. You will feel the joint pains, but the lower back problems is that crippling lower back pain in the muscles that's sort of inflamed, and we are feeling it, whereas we're trying to transverse in our movement, it's limited in its range of movement. Now, I can go into literature, which is quite impressive for people who are listeners. It sounds like you know what you're talking about, but I'm going to avoid going down that road because it kind of sort of creates like an alienation between the person who is talking the science and the person who's actually suffering with the ailment. What happened to the days when we used to just give advice to people from those who had been there, done that, and found a solution in their personal lives? There's nothing wrong with that. I know we hear that term anecdotal, but there is no one solution for anything. So the tips I'm going to give you, I would like you to consider them, give them a try if you are suffering with lower back problems, because they really, really work for me, who suffered with crippling lower back pains at what I would call the peak of my life. Now, the time when I did have the lower back pains, I also did have a prolapse disc as well. I thought they were connected. I thought they were both the same issue. But then I had the operation on the prolapse disc, which got rid of the shooting sensations down my leg. It was like a pinched nerve. But then the lower back problems returned. They were there before the operation, and within about 3 months afterwards, they returned and they got worse. The time I was at the peak of my fitness, because I was running on average around about 21 miles a week. I was going into the gym 3 times a week. I had six pack, which was protruding through my shirt at the time. And I was doing my final year. I was in my final year at university doing sports sciences. I was playing a lot of sports, competing with people, but I suffered in silence because I didn't want people to know that I was in extreme pain, particularly when I had to turn suddenly. Then I stumbled across the solution without having to go for advice, because I went to a physio to get advice in it, and nothing really truly worked. When we do have pains in our bodies, particularly with our muscles, what is the first thing we do? When you stop and think about it, there's this natural propensity to stretch it or to roll it, which is becoming very common. People will use like a myofascial roller or a foam roller to really compress that area. But I'm telling you right now, it does not work. I will also advise against using a myofascial roller or foam roller directly on your spine, because that is what caused me to have the shooting sensations in my spine, because the vertebrae was touching upon the central nervous system. It's not a good idea. Maybe you could move to a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, but not directly on your spine. Now, these things might help with easing the pain. You can use whatever you can to ease the pain, but we want to get rid of it. We want to get rid of this problem. Now, like I said, I stumbled across the solution when I went to go visit my brother. Another time, we had a few guests around at the house, and he didn't have a bed for me. So I decided to take the cushions from the sofa, put it on the floor, and just slept there for 3 days. And after the 3 days of sleeping on the floor, the pain disappeared. It was gone. I was free in my body. Now, nobody had advised me that what I was sleeping on had made a big difference. I then realized that when I went back home to lay on my very, very comfortable mattress, the pain returned again. It had to do with the posture or the position that I was laying in on the bed I was using. So I explored it even further. I went and got myself a memory foam mattress. Now, again, not really worth you investing in. I can see now that there is sort of, it's being phased out now. Nobody's talking about memory phones anymore. Bed's not really just there for sleeping on, by the way. It is there for other things. You know what I mean? And you really don't get much life out of it when you've got a memory phone. But the hybrid, which is a combination of like a spring and memory together, is ideal. You may have to invest a lot of money in it. And at the time, I didn't have a lot of cash, but it was one of the best investments I had ever had. And this would be perfect right now for me to be able to sort of plug one if I had some kind of kickbacks for promoting a mattress. But unfortunately, I don't. But I would say and strongly advise that you go and invest in a good mattress that's nice and solid with a little bit of spring and bounce in it, but not too much of a spring and bounce. Stay away from very, very comfortable sofas and mattresses, like hammocks, which basically don't have any solid surface. That will exacerbate the problem and it cause the back to stay in that sort of rounded position. Really do avoid those chairs by any means necessary. So that eased the pain. But also, we look at the exercises I was doing in the gym. Although I looked strong and I could evidence it by the weights I was able to lift, I was able to bench press 100 kgs. And yes, I had the muscles that looked good. Was I really that strong? Because when I moved apartments, so I was moving from the college campus to my new apartment, I needed friends to come and help me. And a lot of them were not as strong as me at all. But they had no problem with moving these objects. They would pick it up and walk 20, 30 yards with it and continue. And I would have to keep putting it down. And there was that voice in the back of my mind saying, you're not as strong as you think you are. Now we're talking about the core. You see, yes, as much as I looked like I was strong because I had the six pack, my core was weak. The core is not the six pack. The six pack is part of the core, but the whole core is your midsection from your pelvis up to your collarbone. Okay, that is your core. And you know it's strong because you can keep stable and carry a weight and travel with it or move something from left to right, transverse as you do your movement. So when I'm in the gym, I was only ever doing exercises that were in the sagittal plane or in the frontal plane. So that's forward and backwards, left to right, which are the most common exercises. Now, I'm not against them, but if you don't work the transverse muscles, the movements that cause you to turn or twist, then you're neglecting it. And there will be a big disparity between those muscles. And most pains in the body are caused by a giant disparity between muscles that are being exercised and others that are being neglected. That makes sense. For instance, if you are doing a job where you need to just paint and you're painting all the time with your right hand, going from left to right with your right hand, then you've got your left hand, which is being neglected. And all those muscles that work all the way down your back are being also neglected. And that's where we get the pain in the body, that massive disparity between them. So when you go to the gym, it's not just about just pushing a heavy weight. It's about causing the body to become more balanced and creating strength that you can use in real life. So I would advise also, if you're going to the gym, do exercises where you're picking up weights as well and moving them from one place to another. You don't have to travel. You can pick it up from the ground, twist and lift and put it, say, on a shelf or something, but anything that requires you to challenge your transverse movement. Now, before you go into those movements though, again, warning, make sure that you warm up properly. When you're warming up, don't just run on the treadmill, because again, that is a movement in one plane. It's not a transverse movement. So if you are warming up, again, you want to basically emulate the movements that you would do without a loading. That's your warm up. And you want to warm up enough so you're starting to feel your body literally warm up. If you do try and pick up something without warming up, you are definitely going to feel those pains. So I get a lot of clients who will complain of pains that they've received in the winter time because they've gone into doing heavy weights, picking up a kettlebell or something like that outdoors in the freezing cold, and they have not warmed themselves up properly. Now, what kind of exercises would I recommend? Now, just think about it. You've got exercises like the halo with the kettlebell, which goes around the neckline. And that's pretty much the only exercise you can do with a weight or some kind of a load where you're doing a transverse movement around that line of your back. We've also got the gamma cast or the shield cast, which is with the club. You don't see many of those clubs in a gym. But again, like I said, we're not neglecting that movement with the shoulders around the back. Now you can explore loads of different movements. I'm showing you some images of what I would do in the gym as well. But like I said to you, you need to make sure you warm up properly and don't really go for very heavy weight as well. You could go for very quite light weights. They will really help. You're not trying to create this hypertrophy where you're pushing 120 kgs or something like that. That might knock your spine out of place. Now, finally, avoid any movements, although this is not specific to the lower back pains, but more of the sort of slip disc, that includes you to carry a weight and hinge and rotate at the same time. In fact, I would avoid just hinging and rotating at the same time anyway. So the old windmill exercise you used to get in PE classes, I'd advise you avoid doing that. Or like the Russian twists, where you've got a kettlebell or a medicine ball and you're twisting and hinging at the same time as well. The lumbar region of the spine is not designed to support that type of movement whilst bearing a load. So just bear that in mind. Now, that is quite dangerous on the spine, so avoid that. So that's my tips, my advice when it comes to dealing with the lower back. Of course, there may be other reasons. Generally, they're saying that we're sitting down way too much. But I would argue against that because my father was somebody who was a driving instructor for 30 years. He would sit down for 8 hours a day. His peers would be taxi drivers and lorry drivers, and they're sitting down for these long periods of time, and they did not suffer with the lower back pains. Nevertheless, you do need to make sure that you're not sitting down too much. You'll end up with what we call gluteal amnesia, which means that your butt has just gone flat because it's not being used. And when your butt is weak, then it starts to be sort of compensated in the lower back. So it can lead to that when it comes to lifting things. Anyway, that's my tip for today. Hopefully it's helped. I'd love to get feedback from you if it's done any good for you. Don't forget to check out my book, which you can download on Amazon or Kindle, which is The Science of Sport Skill Learning. I'll put a link in the description. And by all means, I'll look forward to seeing you in the next post.